Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Off normal blocks here, but dealing with, the emergency of what's happening in Iran and the Middle East due to the assassination of General Soleimani. Joining us to do that, no one better that I could think of, Derek Davison. He is a foreign policy analyst. He also is the proprietor of the Foreign Exchanges newsletter, which you can subscribe to through Substack. I'd really recommend you do it. It's an excellent newsletter on history, on foreign policy, covering every part of the globe with a really, really wide-ranging analysis and independence of thought and anti-imperial, anti-colonial perspective. Derek, thanks so much for being here.
Sure, happy to do it.
So who was General Soleimani?
So Qasem Soleimani was, like most high-ranking officers in the Iranian military these days, he got his start during the Iran-Iraq War, which followed almost immediately on the heels of the Iranian Revolution in 1979. His first action involved with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and specifically with the unit that became the Quds Force, involved infiltrating northern Iraq to cultivate relationships with Kurdish groups who were opposed to Saddam Hussein, and thereby, create a sort of internal force that could, cause trouble for the Iraqi government. He worked for. He was, involved at a high level in the Quds Force. From throughout the 80s into the 90s in places like Lebanon and Iraq, was promoted to commander of the Quds Force. It's not entirely clear exactly when, but it was sometime either late 1997 or early 1998. And his first big sort of charge as the head of the Quds Force, and the way in which he became, sort of known to the U.S. Was his involvement with Shia militias in Iraq that formed in the wake of the U.S. invasion in 2003. Training, Quds Force was involved in training them, in logistics support, in supplying them with weapons. And Soleimani was intimately sort of involved in that process. He's also been involved almost, over the entire sweep of his career. He's been involved in the creation and sort of support of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. He's been the main Iranian representative to Syria in terms of supporting the government of Bashar al-Assad. Quds Force has supported the Houthis in Yemen to some degree. Basically, I mean, he's sort of the international face of the Iranian military and to some degree the Iranian government, period. He's, Quds Force is a sort of special operations force. It does most of the foreign work that the Iranian military gets up to, and it operates largely like a special forces unit. It gets involved in sort of developing proxies, training them, occasionally carrying out direct action, but usually operating through these local groups that are connected to the Quds Force and kind of assisted by the Quds Force.
So we're going to play a clip now, which might seem, I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. I guess on some level it's a certain just kind of like twisted comic relief. But there's a couple of things in this content that actually raises some very serious questions. So one is the extent to which, everybody from Elizabeth Warren to any number of, and Joe Biden, obviously, and Pete Buttigieg, and any number of, Democratic pundits and MSNBC is essentially co-signing on this assassination, but just saying like, there should have been a thoughtful Instagram video that went along with it, or, something like that. And then also, this this point that we really need to make, and we'll come back to that, and because we also just recorded an illicit history that will be released for patrons on Sunday, but that. Look, we don't want anybody doing this sort of thing. I don't want a global politics or a Middle Eastern politics that is defined by proxy wars and, and lack of respect for sovereignty, and civilians are caught in the crosshairs of hegemonic and imperial ambitions and of the United States and all the rest, right? And so it's not like oh yes, this was great, right? Like the Quds Force, they're like, they're a nice little humanitarian project. On the other hand, the reality is like, yeah, this guy was a general. So I don't know what that like. Yes, they're fighting a proxy war with the United States. What like this melodramatic, childish, like he hurt Americans. I don't want Americans to be hurt. I don't want anybody to be hurt.
Right.
But what? Like, yeah, he was a general fighting a proxy war. I don't know. Like, there are adults who have serious foreign policy and political jobs who, in addition, they're not peace and love and tie-dye types, because they have no problem with any number of bombs we unleash on other people, but they apparently live in some type of like gnome world where, other people that come up against us with their own foreign policy, I guess they're supposed to come at us with super soakers while we drone them.
Right. Yeah, they're bad guys. They're the villains of the story, because
Right.
the Americans, the United States has to be the protagonist of everything that happens in the world. So anybody who opposes the United States must therefore be the villain.
So this is sound I want you to react to. I'm sorry I got on that tangent. It's just I'm amazed at the childishness of people in response to this. But this is from September 2015. Hugh Hewitt, another person who should never have been allowed to read the foreign section of a newspaper, and a candidate, Donald Trump. And there is something here that I think kind of distills everything.
If this is what I think it's going to be, it's remarkable. Yes.
It's remarkable. We're going to play a little bit of this.
Are you familiar with General Soleimani?
Yes. Go ahead. Give me a little. Go ahead. Tell me.
He runs the Quds Forces.
Yes. Okay. Right.
Do you expect
And I
his
think the Kurds,
behavior?
by the way, have been horribly mistreated by us.
No, not the Kurds. The Quds Forces, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Quds
Yes.
Forces, the bad guys.
Right.
Do you expect his behavior to
I
change
thought
as a
you said
result?
Kurds.
No.
Oh,
Quds.
I'm sorry. I thought you said Kurds, because I think the Kurds have been very poorly treated by us here. Go ahead.
Agreed. So Soleimani runs the Quds Forces. Do you expect his behavior is going to change as a result of this deal with Iran?
I
I'm
think
not
that
asking you who's
Iran
on
right
second.
now is in the driver's seat to do whatever they want to do. I think what's happening with Iran is, I think it's one of the, and I covered it very well. I assume you saw the news conference. I think Iran it's one of the great deals ever made for them. I think it's one of the most incompetent contracts I've ever seen. I'm not just talking about defense. I'm not talking about a contract with another country. I've never seen more of a one-sided deal, I think, in my life. Absolutely.
Well, Soleimani is to terrorism sort of what Trump is to real estate. He's many people would say he's the most dangerous man in the world, and he runs the Quds Forces, which is their Navy SEAL. Do you think they're going to stop?
The gentleman that was going back and forth with Russia and meeting with Putin, I read something, and that seems to be also where he's at. He's going back and forth, meeting with other countries, et cetera, et cetera.
That's the guy. And so,
not
do
good.
you think?
Not good for us. And what it shows is a total lack of respect. I mean, that the other countries would even be entertaining him, and they're entertaining him big league. Big league.
Big league.
So when you went before the Senate,
I just want to say later in the post game we'll also play the part where Trump gets pissed at you, Hewitt, for asking him gotcha questions, which he defines as asking about specific people in the Middle East, which is awesome. But honestly, okay, Derek, what?
That was like a vaudeville routine, really. I mean,
why don't you tell me? Okay. Yes.
I think you don't know who the Quds Force is. You tell me who they are.
And of course, we don't even gloss over the fact that, of course, this bloated scumbag totally betrayed the Kurds. But how is it that what though that's going on there is that different from most foreign policy discourse about Iran and how we got where we are?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of it's not. It's just sort of dumber, right? I mean, it's sort of, but the discourse has been all day. I mean, since last night, since the story broke, that you can't talk about what's really important here, which is the repercussions of this assassination and what it could mean, without going through like a 5-minute condemnation of Qasem Soleimani and what he did through his career. And it's been amazing to watch, this parade of people on cable news, and to watch most of the presidential candidates that, they can't just talk about what happened here. They have to, preface it with this litany of wrongdoing, to just so everybody knows that they're not like on board with the Iranians. Like they can't be accused of anything.
And I just want to say, like, as an example, whatever else I might think of, Amy Klobuchar, I was not concerned that she was a big supporter of General Soleimani.
Yeah, I don't know. And the thing that kills me is all of these guys. Klobuchar, Biden, Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren. They're going to be accused by Donald Trump of being pro-Iran anyway. And the people for whom that attack is effective are going to believe it no matter how they equivocate on something like this. So it gets them nothing, but it dilutes the message about what a really dumb thing this was to do and risky thing this was to do, and sort of weakens the main point, all in service of nothing, really.
I mean, but I think it's also, the reason I want to emphasize that is because, again, like, look, I looked at Warren's statement, and some people won't like this. I don't think she knew who Soleimani was, right? Like, she's not going to express it at like an idiot like Trump. But the danger with so many of these candidates, obviously led by Joe Biden, who is a pure creature of the foreign policy establishment, this is stuff that they actually think, right? Like I think in some cases, and it's certainly Buttigieg. So I think in some cases, yes, you're dealing with people that just sort of reflexively feel a need to dilute the message and the clarity. But then there's also a lot of Tommy Vitor, of all people, actually put out a tweet kind of saying like, look, you don't need to lead with how bad this guy was. There's other stuff going on here, and Neera Tanden immediately actually there's nothing wrong with him saying that he killed Americans. So and I think that's actually a genuine belief that a lot of these people have, so it's dangerous, not just because it's foolish politics in the face of Trump. It's also like underlining the fact that these candidates will they are either totally part of the foreign policy establishment, or if they're Warren, their first instinct will always be to go to the foreign policy establishment, and then she'll slightly revise it after getting some pushback on Twitter. Right, and this is how you get a lack of discussion about the things that the United States does in the world, because this is how you get, for example, the criminal lack of debate that we had about the Iraq War, because everybody's response when the Bush administration was clearly running, gearing up to go to war, was first to condemn Saddam Hussein and then go, but maybe we should talk about this. And by the time you get to the but, nobody's paying attention anymore. It's the condemnation is what sticks and what makes it easy to sell the public when, everybody across the political spectrum, or nearly everybody across the political spectrum, is, condemning this person, and it sort of makes it easier to sell that policy. Right. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.